Howdy there, neighbors. This is your boy, Hillbilly Jim, telling you I was born country.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Born Country Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Arthur Bourne, and I have something a little different for you this week. In the spirit of one of my favorite events of the entire year, we are celebrating Wrestlemania week here on the podcast. I've lined up not one, but two guests for the show, and both are being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2018. My guests, Hillbilly Jim and Double J Jeff Jarrett, both have ties to the country music world, and I had the opportunity to speak with each of them on that front. So, if you aren't a wrestling fan, there's still a little something here for everyone. Before we get to the interviews, I want to ask everyone to help me out on getting the Born Country Twitter numbers up this week. You can follow the show on Twitter at Born Country Pod, and over the last 2 weeks, I've been sending out direct messages to as many listeners as I can, and it's been a blast chatting with everyone. If you're on Twitter and already follow Born Country, check your DMs as you may have a message sitting there from me in your inbox. On the other end, my DMs are wide open, so if you haven't heard from me yet, feel free to reach out and message me. I'll respond to any and all messages as time permits. I love hearing from you folks. Alright, let's get to the interview. Enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you at the end.
Hey guys, it's Cassie Lynn Wells from Cassie's Kick-Ass Country. Be sure to check out my podcast every Tuesday morning on iTunes, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and much more. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hillbilly Jim, welcome to the Born Country Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Good to be with you.
Now, first of all, congratulations on your upcoming 2018 WWE Hall of Fame induction. You've got to be excited about this weekend's events.
Well, I absolutely am. It was something I really wasn't sitting around thinking about, and it's brought back a lot of memories and good times and a lot of reflecting, and it's going to be quite a time for me, and I'm glad to share it with everybody.
Now, you're being inducted with a pretty impressive classic Hall of Famers like Bill Goldberg, Jeff Jarrett, the Dudley Boys, Ivory, and Mark Henry. Most of these guys and gal, they weren't yet on the scene when you were fully active. Before we get into some other topics, do you have any thoughts on your fellow inductees?
Well, listen, I know most of these cats and these ladies and guys, and they're good folks, and they're all quite deserving of this, and I'm happy for each one of them and their families and their fans, and I'm just happy that they've included me because, you know, I've never been one of those guys that ever sat around and thought about Hall of Fame stuff. Everybody for years and years and years has always asked me this Hall of Fame thing, why aren't you in there? Well, it's not for me to decide that because you don't put yourself in something like this. And I've just told everybody simply the way I felt, which is this. I've had a Hall of Fame life. And whether or not this came or not, I'm not the kind of guy that's ever going to worry about something like that or be concerned with it. But now that it's came, it's quite an honor, and I'm just happy that they've decided to include me in this wonderful hall. And I hope it's a wonderful weekend for everybody, and glad to be a part of it.
I do want to touch on a few of your in-ring highlights, and though it's been made clear a number of times on this podcast that I grew up not only on country music throughout the 90s, but also having professional wrestling playing a major role in my childhood. Some listeners may be asking, why is there a wrestler on my country music podcast? Well, Jim, today's worlds collide as you have a number of links to the country music world, and I'd like to look back on a few of them here today.
Okay.
Now, in 1985, the then World Wrestling Federation released the Wrestling album on Epic Records, and this album featured a number of wrestling superstars performing a range of songs featuring the likes of Junkyard Dog, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Mean Gene Okerlund, and more. One of the most notable tracks features Hillbilly Jim performing Don't Go Messing with the Country Boy, which I have to say has been stuck in my head since it was announced that you'd be inducted in the Hall of Fame. What can you tell me about your experience recording the song and any memories that you have from the album's recording sessions?
Got a lot of memories about that. First off, I've got 2 albums, gold albums, that hang in my house here. I'm not one of those kind of guys that leaves a lot of wrestling memorabilia around. I've got a lot of it put away, but I'm not the kind of guy that likes to turn his house into a shrine to himself. So I believe in living more in the now. Happy for what I've done, delighted about what I've done, and it's great for me to have had this wonderful experience. But I do have 2 gold albums hanging on my wall from those epic records we did. The first one that you're referring to is the one called the Wrestling album, and then we did one a year or so after that called Pile Driver. I had singles on both of those, and the albums went gold, and I've got them hanging on my wall. Now, the song that you're referring to, of course, is my ring song called Don't Go Messing with a Country Boy, and, that was something that they wanted to use for me. As soon as you heard the first note of that song, you knew it was Hillbilly Jim coming to the ring. And that's what it was, a very upbeat type fiddle song, and got everybody going. It was unmistakable, and I've heard it in arenas and halls all over the world since we did it, and I'm very happy to have done it. And I recorded it in New York City, and a lot of people don't realize this. I did it at a place called the Hit Factory. People don't realize it. A big part of this song that I did was the band that played it. The band that played it was Eric Weisburn, and he had a band called Deliverance Band. Eric Weisburn's band, they're the ones that had the great soundtrack that was on the Dueling Banjo song, if you remember, off that Burt Reynolds movie.
Sure.
Called Deliverance. And they were the guys that played the music for me. Of course, I did the vocal on it. And, of course, the other song that I did called Waking Up Alone was a duet with a lady who to this day, my friend, I've never seen that lady because she recorded hers in Nashville, and I think I've recorded mine in Philadelphia. And I've never met that lady, but I'll give you a little update on the Hillbilly Jim Don't Go Mess with a Country Boy song.
Sure.
That song was written primarily by a great lady, Marshall Chapman, out of Nashville, Tennessee, and it goes as this, and she's told me this on my show before. I have a radio show that I do for Sirius XM Radio, and she told me that she was in the office one day, and she walked in the office, and Doc Thomas had got a call from some of the officials at the WWE, and they had told him about me, and they need to create a song for one of the guys going to the ring. He's a country boy, a Hillbilly Jim wrestler, and Doc Thomas said as she walked in the door cold, and Doc Thomas said to her, "Hey, look, I know who's going to write this song, and she just walked in the door." And she didn't a bit more know about it than you did or I did. So that's how that came about. And she and Doc Palmas put together the Don't Go Mess with the Country Boy song, and it's turned out to be a wonderful thing for me and a signature song for me to come to the ring to, and I'm real proud of it.
And I think the song could easily slip into any country music playlist, and folks wouldn't even be able to tell that it was linked to pro wrestling. It's that much fun. Did you ever imagine that getting into professional wrestling would lead to you recording not one but two songs for a wide release?
Listen, I've been all over the world, and I've been all over about every place that you can go, and I've been to all the spots in the cities I've traveled to. You go down to the little bars and lounges, and you see great musicians all over the place playing, and none of them ever get a chance to have a gold record, ever. I mean, some of them are just phenomenal musicians around this country. You'd see them in little places just trying to get a break, and I'm thinking, who would have ever thought that someday I would have two gold records on my wall because of the power of the wrestling industry? And I've got two gold albums on Epic Records, which was a big label. And it just goes to show you that you couldn't have, you started out dreaming someday that you're going to wind up in some big Hall of Fame or something, everybody would have said you were crazy. It's not something you can dream of or even entertain in a dream. It just has to be something that happens. And I was just a lucky recipient of all that. So I've said this many times before, I'd rather be lucky than good, and I was real lucky.
So you were still very much around the wrestling world in the early 90s, and the majority of my own Hillbilly Jim memories are based on your work on the WWF Primetime show. But you had other television work under your belt, as years prior you made multiple appearances on Hee-Haw.
Right. Now, also co-hosted that thing called All American Wrestling, which was on the USA Network with me and Gene Okerlund for many years. I enjoyed that, and then for a while I was one of the broadcasting voice for the Madison Square Garden Network with the late great Gorilla Monsoon and the one and only Lord Alfred Hayes. I did that for a while. Of course, I've wore a lot of hats with that company, which I've been very fortunate to have. Like I say, even after injuries and stuff kind of put me on the shelf, and I decided I was going to pack it in, I became the director of sales for North America for Coliseum Home Video, and because video was a real big thing for the WWE Home Video. It was WWF at that time, and then WWE. And I got to wear that hat for a while, which was a lot of fun. And then as the years have gone by, I did those sorts of things for them. You know, we have a big thing that we do at every WrestleMania. It's called Fan Access, And I began that many years ago. I got a call from a guy in the office in Connecticut named John Suhiga who had a vision. He said, Hillbilly, we're thinking about starting this mobile tour that's going to start on one end of the country and go all the way across the country. It's going to wind up the weekend of WrestleMania in the city, wherever it's at. And we call it the Fan Access. And I did that for 5 years in a row. And now it's morphed to a big, huge thing that they do for the entire week, like they'll have it this week in New Orleans. And it turned out to be a big deal. And, of course, I come back from time to time and do special little events for them if they got anything they want me to do. I've just been really blessed to have kept my hand kind of in this business. And, I seem to be one of those lucky guys that once I got accepted by the people, thank God, they never let me go. Everything that I've done in my life and has brought me to this Hall of Fame has been because the fans connected with me, and I connected with them, and they never turned their back on me. Pretty amazing.
It's funny that you mentioned Fan Access. Actually, you and I met at WrestleMania 23 briefly
Right.
at that Fan Access. There was some kind of contest, and I got pulled up on stage. I didn't win, but I was close. I think I got second place.
What city was that in? I forget it.
That was in
Where were we at?
Detroit in a mall.
Detroit, yep. Because we did WrestleMania at that Ford Center, that new building they had there.
Yep.
That's where the WrestleMania was, I think, and we were all around the Detroit area that week of it.
I do want to go back to your appearances on Hee-Haw. Was this booked through the World Wrestling Federation at the time, or how did you find your way onto the show?
Absolutely not. My Hee-Haw was through a dear friend of mine in Nashville, Tennessee, who was the guy that had the vision to get me on Sirius XM radio, and I've now been there almost 13 years. This gentleman was a big deal in the music business. His name was Steve Popovich Sr. Okay, he was big. He was big in the New York area, and then he was in Nashville, and he's real famous for discovering people like Boz Scaggs, and he's the one that really broke the Jacksons. He's most notably famous for having Cleveland International Records out of Cleveland, and he's the one that had the Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell album. And and he's also real famous for Sue and Sony, and he's the first guy that won a big thing. But anyway, Steve is the one that I got hooked up with him in Nashville. He picked up the phone, and of course, I also got booked out of Nashville through Steve and a guy named Buddy Lee. There was a big promotion company there, and a booking agency called Buddy Lee Worldwide Attractions. I mean, they had everybody you can imagine: Dionne Warwick, the Spinners, Willie Nelson, Ray Charles. Everybody had Hillbilly Jim. So on the side from my wrestling career, they're the ones. And Steve Popovich picked up the phone, called Sam Lavella over at the taping of Hee-Haw. They did it in Nashville there, and he said, "I got Hillbilly Jim here." Next thing I know, I got a shot to go over there. They got me some Hee-Haw overalls. Next thing you know, I'm jumping up out of the cornfield with Grandpa Jones, and I'm talking to everybody over there, Lulu Roman and everybody at Gaylord Sartain, and I'm having the best time ever over there, and that's how that happened. And I got to be on 2 or 3 episodes of Hee-Haw, which was really a lot of fun for me. Because, growing up down in Kentucky, your Hee-Haw was an institution. It probably was for you, too. And one of the longest-running TV shows there ever was in syndication. And I enjoyed it, and that was just being in the right place at the right time and having some good connections.
Now, Hee-Haw was mostly before my time, but I catch reruns on occasion, and it's still so much fun to watch today. I searched and searched to try to find footage of your episodes with no luck, but if anyone out there listening knows where to find them, send me a tweet at BornCountryPod and let me know. I'd love to see this stuff. Now,
it's out there somewhere. They're all hid away, Everything is out there. You just got to, how this whole world of technology, you got to ask it the right question and it'll give you the right answer.
Absolutely.
I'm not the question. I don't know, but I've got some friends of mine that are pretty doggone good at that. I can get them to do about anything, and they'll mess around on that computer before you know, oh, here it is.
Now, finally, on the country music side of our chat, you've been hosting the Sirius XM show that you mentioned earlier, Hillbilly Jim's Moonshine Matinee. Can you fill us in on the show and how people can listen?
Well, I'm on Outlaw Country 60. My show, East Coast time, begins on Saturday mornings from 10 to 2, and then you can hear it again on Sunday from 2 to 6. And, of course, in that time frame, you go back an hour for Central, whatever, for West Coast time. And I've been doing that. If I make it to the first week of July, it will be 13 years I've been doing that show. I have special guests on there, and I play Outlaw Country, which I think this is an outlaw country. America is. Our tastes are pretty diverse. So I'm all over the place in what I can play, what I can play. I might play some Southern rock. I'll play new stuff that you never heard before. I'll play the classics that people have. I might even get some blues from time to time. And just whatever my feeling goes to is what I'm able to do. And like I say, it's a 4-hour shows, and from time to time, I'll have guests on there from time to time. And you know, and I've been doing it for a good long time. My boss, the guy that hired me, is little Steven Van Zandt of Bruce Springsteen fame and Sopranos fame. He is the guy that heads up the Outlaw Country channel. He also has one called Little Steven's Underground Garage. But he's the guy that I've worked for through his company, through Sirius XM Radio now for 13 years. And I'll tell you, the vision for this was by the late, great Steve Popovich Sr. He's the one that put me and Cowboy Jack Clement on that channel with little Steven Van Zandt, and now I cannot hardly believe it, brother. I'm looking down the barrel at 13 years.
I myself was clued into your show by your buddy Shane Owens, who was on the podcast a few months ago, so I want to make sure he gets a shout out here.
Dear friend of mine, a great Alabama native, and a great country singer in the real form, in the real deal, a bona fide guy that really evokes a lot of those old-timey country feel songs that he's got in him, and a great guy who's out there trying to make it in today's world, which is a pretty tough run. But if you get a chance to check out Shane Owens, you got to check him out. ShaneOwensCountry.com, I think, is how you get him.
Absolutely. Well, with WrestleMania 34 coming up only a few days from now, and of course your Hall of Fame induction on Friday, April the 6th, I'd like to touch on 3 of your own WrestleMania appearances. Your WrestleMania debut, of course, was in 1986 at the second WrestleMania, in which you took part in the NFL versus WWF Battle Royal. Right. What was it like getting in there and mixing up with the worlds of football and pro wrestling colliding? Were there any NFL stars that night that you thought might make a good crossover into the ring full time?
Well, they all kind of were interested in the wrestling deal, and they were all of them seemed to be pretty nice guys. Of course, you know, there were some guys outside the ring that were pretty famous. Ed Too Tall Jones was one of the referees, and Dick Butkus was one of the referees. But in the ring, it was quite a thing. They were all kind of, be honest with you, they were all kind of freaked out that the size of us, the NFL guys, they were kind of freaked out with people like, of course, Andre the Giant, and myself, and Big John Studd, and you know, big guys, tall guys, and big guys. But they had some pretty good tough guys in there as well. You know, William Refrigerator Perry was in there, and Bill Fralick was in there, and Jimbo Covert from the Chicago Bears, and it was quite a lineup and quite a thing. I really remember that WrestleMania a lot because I got to bring my mother from Kentucky up there. She had some relatives in Chicago. We did it at the Chicago Rosemont, the arena there. And the year before, I would have been on the very first WrestleMania I was scheduled, but I picked up a real bad injury on February 25th, 1984, I believe it was, 85, maybe out in San Diego, California, knee injury. Just maybe a couple of months, no more than a couple of months out from the first WrestleMania, or I would have been on the first one in the Garden. But I picked up the second one and several more after that, and that was a big deal for me. That Battle Royal was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I stayed friends with a lot of those NFL guys for a lot of years after that. Harvey Martin was in there, you know, from the Dallas Cowboys, and that was a pretty colorful time for pro wrestling.
The match was eventually won by the great Andre the Giant. Have you seen the trailer for the upcoming documentary about Andre from HBO?
No, but the last few weeks since they're talking about my induction, a lot of people are asking me about Andre, and I haven't seen the trailer to answer your question, but I'm looking forward to seeing that documentary. It should be something great. He meant a lot to me.
Let's move on to WrestleMania 3, which is possibly your most prolific match, which lined yourself, the Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver against King Kong Bundy, Lord Littlebrook, and Little Tokyo in a 6-man tag. Is this a match that you look back on fondly? It was certainly one of those unforgettable matches that brings a lot of nostalgia for longtime fans.
You know, for a lot of years, it wasn't one of my favorite matches that I remember the most as far as one of my ones I was happiest with. But I began, and I have over the years, got to like it more and more and more and more, and here's why. Because the people really enjoyed it, and because of the magnitude of that world record crowd. I mean, listen, it's not too often that you get out there and get to perform before a world's record crowd. And that was the world record crowd for many years indoors. I mean, at that very building, we outdrew Elvis, we outdrew the Pope, we outdrew the Rolling Stones, and that record lasted all the way up to the great king of country, George Strait, had his down in Texas a few years ago, and then they had to find a bigger building that could hold more, and King George broke our record. But that lasted for several decades, and I was real happy about that. And I can only remember the magnitude of that crowd, which was just something out of this world that you couldn't hardly describe. You have to actually think about what it was like to step in that ring and look out there and see between 93 and 94,000 people in one building inside. Hard to describe.
Yeah, that is wild. I want to skip way forward now to what I assume was your final in-ring appearance at WrestleMania 17, in which you competed in yet again a battle royal. This time you were across the ring from some of the most outlandish characters throughout the history of pro wrestling, like Kamala, Doink the Clown, Brother Love, the Bushwhackers, Iron Sheik, and a number of others. It was short and sweet, but it definitely filled that nostalgic need of a classic wrestling fan. What was it like being back in front of a massive crowd after being away from the ring all those years?
Well, the two things stick out to that is how everybody was happy to see me, and the pop that I got when they announced me. It was an amazing pop from the crowd because I still kind of look like Hillbilly Jim, Where the other guys looked like, they, for whatever reason, they kind of looked a little like age had got them, and some of them didn't look the same. But I still put the overalls on, had the hair, and I did the deal. And they were all into that. And I remember, and then also the other thing that really got me good was being in that historic, once again, that building, which was the Astrodome. Because, in Houston, I knew they were going to stop using that building. And I had the distinction and the pleasure of being in some of the biggest arenas in the country at that time, because I had wrestled in that King Dome that was out there in Seattle, which they imploded. And, of course, I've been in the Superdome, which is where we're going to have WrestleMania 34 at this weekend. And I'm going to be back on that show as well too. And I got to do, of course, the Silverdome in Pontiac, and then the biggest of all of them for a long time was the Astrodome. So that was a lot of fun to me, and being in the ring with some of those old guys, it was a little bit tough, and I'll tell you for why. You had to kind of watch yourself because a lot of these guys' skills had kind of eroded. So you kind of had to guard yourself because when you get in a situation like a lot of people don't realize this, a battle royal, you can get hurt just being in the wrong place at the wrong time by somebody rolling up on your knee or hitting you from the back or twisting the ankle or, because you kind of got to pick your times when you get away from the corner or off the ropes. Because I kind of would wait till everybody kind of would get out of the way and let them eliminate each other. And I was one of the last 2 or 3 in there. I think it was down to me, Sergeant Slaughter, and the Iron Sheik. But it was quite a night. And you're right. That's the last time I really wanted to get in there. Now they've called me on lots of occasions. Let me just tell you this, and your listeners, and they'd asked me about being in different shows, but I've declined them because I don't want to do it. I mean, a lot of guys would break their necks to get back in the ring again. I'm not that guy. I had a great run, had a fantastic memory, and when it's over, it's over. And that's kind of the way I felt.
You get to experience it all again this coming weekend when Hillbilly Jim is inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in New Orleans at WrestleMania 34. What are you most looking forward to this weekend?
Well, I tell you, I'm bringing my kids with me, and my children are all grown now, but I'm kind of glad they're coming down because they're going to get a little taste of this because when I was doing this, they were young, and I kind of kept them away from this business. But here's the deal. This induction is not about me. It's in my name, but it's really for everybody else. It's for my family. It's for my friends. It's all for all the folks that I've made acquaintances through the business. And number one and foremost, it's for the fans. Because I got to live the Hillbilly Jim life. I got to live it in real time. And this, for me, would be unfair for me to share all this by myself. So this is for all the Hillbilly Jim fans, brother, like you, for the nice things you said about me. Please enjoy this. Because if it weren't for people like you and many of your listeners, there wouldn't be no Hillbilly Jim. Now, a lot of people lose track, but I don't lose track. And if anyone tells you they wind up on that stage, at that podium, at that microphone, going into that Hall of Fame by themselves, they will have told you something is wrong. Nobody can do it by themselves. So I want everybody enjoying this, and I want to have one last little celebration of it. This is this is the final straw in my hat, so to speak, as a country boy would say. And I'm going to try to go down there and try to soak it all up, and then I'm going to go over there, and I get to be on the Wrestlemania card too as well, because they're going to bring all the Hall of Famers out. So I'm hoping it's going to be a nice weekend.
All right, well, I'll certainly be watching. And Jim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your years of entertaining wrestling fans around the world and your current contributions to the country music world. Enjoy your weekend, man. You've definitely earned it.
Thank you, my friend. And listen, you call me anytime. Let's visit again. And to all your fans out there, thank you for all your support for all these years. And remember my old Hillbilly Jim saying, I ain't here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. And every time I get around the wrestling fans, doggone, I have the best time. And thank you. And, hey, let's all go to New Orleans, and we're all going in the Hall of Fame.
All right, man. Take care. Joining me on the show now is yet another 2018 inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame, Jeff Jarrett. Welcome to the Born Country Podcast.
How you doing, my friend? Thanks for having me on, and we finally got here.
Yes.
Had a little mix-up and confusion. My people and your people didn't connect. No, I'm kidding. No, I appreciate your time tonight. Looking forward to chatting Hall of Fame and anything else you want to talk about.
Certainly. Jeff, I previously spoke with your fellow inductee, Hillbilly Jim, and like Jim, you played a big part in my childhood pro wrestling memories, and I'm personally very excited to see you going into the Hall of Fame. You've been away from the WWE picture for nearly 2 decades at this point. Did it cross your mind that you'd ever get the call?
No. I've known since early January. It was released February 19th, I think, of this year. So I've had about 6 weeks of press, and that is one of the questions that I get asked. But I was at SmackDown early this week, and that was the first time in almost 19 years since I'd been to an event. Never say never, but I certainly didn't see this coming. Like a lot of other people didn't see it coming as well.
I distinctly remember in 1993 or so reading or being told that a new wrestler was coming to the WWF at the time named Jeff Jarrett, who was a country music singer. Being a kid, this absolutely thrilled me, as I, of course, loved country music, and now there was going to be a country music singing wrestler. Then the Nashville vignettes began to air, and I was devastated. Jeff, and I hope my audience realizes that I'm talking about the character here, but I appreciate what you were doing now, but as a kid, I hated Double J's guts.
Well, job well done then.
Right. Where did the idea for the Double J character come from?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty natural fit. I'd been wrestling, those were actually on the tail end of the territory days. So my family ran a territory here in the Nashville area, and a 7-state area. Went from Louisville, Kentucky down to Memphis and all points in between. And, my father, the McMahon family and the Jarrett family had a relationship. And it was time for me to go to that stage, so to speak, and stepping onto a national stage like that was the first time in my career. The persona had to adapt with that era, and so Vince, the visionary he is, the character. Obviously, he created sports entertainment. He looked at my name, and one thing led to another, and I've always loved country music. Still to this day, I'm a huge country music fan. So everything just started, falling into place. And the Double J character really was just an extension of my personality. So you telling me that you hated me back then, there's a part of me you still hate to this day.
Like you said, being from outside of the Nashville area, who were you listening to throughout the 90s?
Oh, that's easy. The Hat Act, obviously, as you know, this is a music podcast, much more than a wrestling podcast, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. No, but, the Hat Act, Clint Black was obviously breaking, Garth, the usual suspects. I'm a little bit of an old school fan as well. The Horsemen, Willie, Waylon, I was a big fan, believe it or not, of Earl Thomas Conley, and if you want to, George Jones, if you want to go old school, but grew up on that music. Some of those tunes were car riding tunes, and riding up down the roads, in the late '80s, that's what we listened to, and then as we got into the '90s, you can only imagine all the acts breaking and country took on that new feel and Billy Ray Cyrus and Achy Breaky Heart had exploded. Tim McGraw, I could go down the list. Brooks and Dunn, just that whole new wave of country. I was into it. I am to this day. The evolution of country music is a lot like other forms of entertainment. It just continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The basics will always sell. And I still believe that works in wrestling. I still believe it works in music.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on, I want to go back to the Nashville vignettes that hit TV around your debut. As only a bad guy wrestler would, you ripped on country music icons like Conway Twitty, George Jones, Garth Brooks, Billy Ray Cyrus, and even the Grand Ole Opry itself. Did you ever hear from anyone who were subjects of your verbal beatdowns, or was everyone pretty aware that it was part of the show?
Yeah, of course I heard. Absolutely I heard from people. But it was a different era. When you look at those, and I've, some people have looked at it and noticed me, but I always do it. When because downtown Nashville doesn't even represent what it was in the early '90s, and the rhyming back then actually it shows. It had graffiti written on it. The Grand Ole Opry had moved out to Opryland. Downtown Nashville and certainly the Mother Church were nothing like they are today. There was that changing of the guard that Conway and George Jones and those guys, they were on the tail end of their career, and No Show Jones and all that kind of stuff. It really was. And then you had the new kids on the block. So I took shots at all of them. I definitely wasn't prejudiced in who I knocked. Old country, new country, it didn't matter. But I certainly heard from fans. I heard from people in the industry, but everybody understood for the most part that is, that was part of it. I'll just say that.
Sure.
Didn't make them like it, but they knew it was part of it.
In 1995, on WWE Pay-Per-View, you performed the lone Double J single, With My Baby Tonight. It would be around a year later that it was revealed that not only were you lip-syncing the song, but it was actually your roadie who performed the song. The song has had somewhat of a resurgence, in part due to Conrad Thompson and Bruce Pritchard's podcast. What can you tell me about the origins of the song?
I just can remember as the thing rolled out and as WWE always does, their production values. And they were telling me we were going to shoot a video, and then we started collaborating on it. And I realized that this is going to be it's going to be a pretty cool video. And we did a live performance at a small, I don't even want to call it a honky tonk club, but a small bar up around New York City, and we also went in the studio. But Brian Road Dogg James, it goes without saying, and I can say this with authority that it's no secret. I've got some buddies in the country music business, both artists and writers, and a little bit of executives in between. Brian can flat out sing. He's got a great tone. He's not just a good singer, he's a great singer. So that song, in your traditional country, even back then, is a little corny. Even today, it's a little corny, but it's catchy. And the wrestling fan has always been, I'll just say, uniquely super attracted to it. And then when Bruce and Conrad, they started having fun with it. And then, as the snowball went, and as we speak right now in the United Kingdom, they are raising money, attempting to raise money, and they're trying to get the song to chart this week. It's just crazy, the reemergence and the popularity of it and everything that goes with it. So I'm really cool. It's really exciting for me to see that, a song that came around 23 years ago, and I'm just ready for the remake. Aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, my wife has caught me a few times walking around the house singing the song. And
see, it's catchy.
Yeah, it is.
It's one of those songs, Achy Breaky Heart. How corny is that song?
Absolutely.
But when it was out, like Elvira with the Oak Ridge Boys. Boy, I'm probably dating myself, but it's one of those songs that just sticks in your head and you can't get it out.
Absolutely.
And that is, that's music for you. You can't really describe why does that hook stay in your brain, but it does.
Now, with Road Dogg inducting you, is there any chance we hear a little bit of the song live during WrestleMania weekend?
You never know. Never say never in our industry. Certainly never say never when you ask that question. So it's exciting. New Orleans is going to be a fun couple of days. And so who knows where that song may break out.
Now, one of my favorite Jeff Jarrett moments came in 1998 at the Unforgiven pay-per-view, in which you performed Some Girls Do with one of my favorite groups of all time, Sawyer Brown. How did you and the WWE hook up with Mark Miller and the guys, and what was that experience like?
Well, Mark's a personal friend of mine and has been for years and years and years. And him and his organization did the music through the TNA years. But me and Mark go back to when they were first breaking, and he had some high school buddies, the people remember the Bruise Brothers or Ron and Don Harris. But they were the ones that brought us together. But me and Mark were buddies. And then when Double J returned, one thing led to another. And I said, no, I want to sing it. And Mark was like, all right, let's do it. And as every country music fan from that era knows, Some Girls Do was a huge hit for Mark and for the guys and for Sawyer Brown, and fit right into my tone. And we blew it out in Greensboro, North Carolina, and had a lot of fun with that as well.
Well, Jeff, I know you're short on time. You've got a busy weekend ahead with your WWE Hall of Fame induction ceremony, Wrestlemania itself, and all that goes with it. What are you most looking forward to?
Probably reconnecting with old faces and meeting new ones, just because it is the mecca of professional wrestling. 5 consecutive nights, Hall of Fame on Friday, NXT on Saturday, Mania Sunday, Raw and SmackDown on Monday and Tuesday. So really looking forward to just reconnecting and, Access on Saturday goes without saying, seeing the WWE fans, but, standing up, getting on that stage, getting the Hall of Fame ring, Goldberg, Hillbilly Jim, and the others, the class of 2018. It's going to be a special night. That's got to be at the very top of the list.
Before we wrap up, can I ask you one favor?
Sure, man.
All right. Can we take this home with the classic Double J sign-off?
You got it, my friend. That's JEFF, JARRE, double T. That's Double J, Jeff Jarrett.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much for joining the show this week. Enjoy your weekend.
Yep, thanks.
Speaking with Hillbilly Jim and Jeff Jarrett this week was a ton of fun for me, and I hope everyone listening enjoyed it too. I know a lot of you are here to hear from your favorite 90s country music stars, but when the opportunity to get in touch with these two huge stars of my childhood came about, I couldn't say no. I'm thrilled to see both guys deservingly heading into the WWE Hall of Fame this weekend. Again, please make sure to head over to Twitter and follow Born Country Pod. Shoot me a message on there. Let's chat. I'd love for the Born Country community to become even more social than it already is. Check out the show notes for this week's episode in your podcast app, or head over to iwasborncountry.com/show16, where you'll find all of my social media links, plus links to keep up with Hillbilly Jim and Jeff Jarrett. Don't forget that there are Born Country Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, tote bags, and more available at TeePublic, and the easiest way to get to the store is through the blue Shop Now button on the Born Country Facebook page. All merch sales go directly to keeping this show free of charge, so if you appreciate and enjoy the Born Country Podcast, please consider a t-shirt to help support the cause. There are even more ways for you to help the show coming in the very near future with some very cool rewards. Next week, we'll be back with an ACM Awards prediction show, in which I'll be joined by Cassie Lynn Wells of Cassie's Kick-Ass Country podcast, so keep an ear out for that. Until then, I'm going to enjoy WrestleMania weekend. My name is Arthur Bourne, and I was born country. Take care.